listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Sarah Frankel, curator of Coven's Library, a beautifully crafted resource dedicated to helping folks access knowledge connected to our intuitive magic. With a rich background in academia and higher education, Sarah specializes in creative and critical research methodologies. She also walks the path of a practicing mermaid mystic and Jew witch, weaving deep wisdom and enchantment into everything she does. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I should have you introduce me everywhere I go. Yeah. Honestly, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, I'm finally getting better at doing the voice. Oh yeah, I'm so excited to have you here, and I really mean it when I say weaving enchantment into everything that you do, because you really have brought so much magic and beauty into my life, and I am so honored to have you here with us today to share your work with our audience.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is my first time stepping out of the broom closet into a podcast, like expanding the horizons of what it is to really put yourself out here in the digital space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's wild that you say that, because I feel like you do so well, and you're so confident. And I could never tell that you hadn't been in, doing this kind of work forever, because you're just a natural teacher and a natural speaker. So for those who don't know you, could you just share a little bit about who you are and what was your experience like coming out of the broom closet? How did claiming your identity as a Jew witch impact your life, both personally and in digital spaces?
I didn't know about the word broom closet until I read it in the past few years. This idea, for me, I think is adorable. Like, so many of us do our practices privately, and that's where my story comes from. So my background is, I grew up in a Jewish household, but there were certain things you didn't discuss at dinner. You didn't talk about politics, and you didn't talk about religion. Mm-hmm. And so my practices were my practices, and I kept that private. Growing up Jewish in the South, also there's stigma, and so we kept that identity pretty quiet growing up. That just hate has always been here, and that's just a reality. And so I never claimed my Jewish identity. That was also very private. And this idea of the broom closet, of stepping out, came to me because as I decided to take my private practice into a digital space, I started having to explore what that would look like. So stepping into that, claiming Jewish, which mm-hmm. thanks to the internet, I learned about that one. That's a great little word. I love that because it blends so beautifully, because the Jewish mystic aspect of me is connected to the moon. Mm-hmm. And then in pagan and witchcraft lore, the moon has her part there, and the melding between the two is beautiful, that I can weave that devotion together. But when I decided to come out into the digital space, I realized what was out there in that space when I took my private rituals and started photographing them and putting them online. This is when my first tension arose for me personally, because there is the sacred acts and that wisdom and knowledge, and that shouldn't be something we necessarily share with everybody. Mm-hmm. But then on the other hand, I want to be transparent and I want to be authentic and let people know this is what I'm practicing and this is how I practice and what it looks like. And it just put me in a position where I started to see things differently. I have a background in critical research, in consumerism, and when I started on Instagram and Facebook and even YouTube, you can just start seeing the algorithm curate for me all the people that it thinks belongs in my community. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started to also become really aware of how big the digital space is in relation to our physical community.
Yeah, it's interesting how you're talking about this because I don't feel like people understand the vulnerability that it takes to show these like sacred spaces. And like you're saying, in this digital world where everybody's just like you're just blasted with everyone's like altars and and I adore it to a certain extent. And then it's also, I've had to really work on like, what do I keep private and what do I feel comfortable with sharing? And I have to ask myself that often. Because, when I first started, on my spiritual journey, I was working with a Sufi mentor and she was, an esoteric teacher. And there was so much where she was like, you cannot share the mantras that you learn here. You cannot ever speak this. It was like a true, initiation. And there's so much that I do not share, right? And she told me it's not because we're hoarding it. It's because if the wrong person hears this, it could actually cause harm. Because they're not ready. And so a lot of the esoteric and the initiation stuff was there to almost protect not only the wisdom, but the people. So I've had to ask myself, like, what is safe? Like, what is, healthy as far as like sharing pictures with my community? Because I love celebrating the middle of the year. And I do love sharing the little altars that we make and some of our ceremony. And I love seeing my friends because I don't have like this physical community. So a lot of times my followers and my friends are showing up in that digital space. And so I think I get like, I kind of forget that there's other people even on there because I'm like, yeah, this is my community, but it is such a challenge, and there's been times where I've shared something vulnerable and it wasn't received well. And it was like, so it's like, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of intention and a lot of just knowing, that this feels right to share, like this, because we're trying to bring more visibility to something, right? More awareness around beliefs that maybe are not so like modernized, I guess. As someone that practices a lot of pagan traditions, it has been really hard because I want to be accepted. I want to have community, and just the way that people around me celebrate Easter, I want to be able to celebrate Beltane. And I just want it to be like, oh, great. Like she's celebrating something with her family and it be seen well and not be this like stigmatized thing. But then I'm also like, I get a little afraid sometimes. I'm finally to a better place though, where I feel like my online community is finally in a good alignment, but it takes like weeding out certain people for you to say, okay, now I can be vulnerable because my space, the people that are here with me are not judging me. They're not going to bully me. And that just takes a lot of intention on who you allow in. How is your privacy setting? And putting your own protection around it. So even, with a podcast, I put intention around that it will not find anyone that it's not meant for, which I actually feel like sometimes limits the reach. But I would rather it only reach the ears that are ready for it. And that came from that Sufi teacher of not like pushing it on people that aren't ready. And so it is in my intention with every episode that it will find the people that it's meant to find. And, but yeah, I love how you kind of talk about it coming out of the broom closet. So many of us are scared to talk about our personal practices. And every time I teach a class, everyone's like, yeah, I really love astrology, or I really love this, but I'm so scared, you know? Like, so I think it takes some people like us that are being vulnerable in that space to say, no, like what we're doing is not evil, it's not negative, it's not, you know, so that we can kind of tear down some of these restrictive false perceptions on what is witchcraft, you know? So I love that you bring awareness to that.
Speaking to that, using the classroom as a space to empower and sharing our practices, even exploring what others in our community do. And so a great example I use, because I teach Introduction to Lunar Magic, we survey in the class, you know, do you use moon water? Do you collect moon water? And then we can all get together and discuss how we use our moon water that's collected. And it's really cool because that's how I learned that some people put it in diffusers or they put it in their baths. And I was like, oh, well, I paint with it, or I water my plant with it, or, you know, all sorts of things. So it's a great way to get people to share and commune. And we are so isolated in so many ways that digital space gives us a huge opportunity. But that then provides another opportunity around intention and protection.
Right.
Because we have to have that in place online and in person.
So why do you think that it's important that we bring ethics into conversations about witchcraft and spiritual practices, especially now?
So this conversation wasn't in the forefront of my mind until more recently. Originally, what I was seeing online was giving me a lot of red flags. I was seeing predatory behavior. I was seeing AI generated content and just bots spamming. But in the 2025 Llewellyn's Witch's Companion, it's a beautiful compilation of essays and contemporary topics on modern magic. There was some really poignant pieces written about how AI influences magic and witchcraft, and that's by Laura Tempest Zakroff, and ways that magical practitioners can use the digital space to legitimize their practice. And that piece by Regina Drab-Barney sparked the bigger picture for me. I started exploring what altruism is for a witch and what our role is on this earth and why we are practicing magic and why are we teaching magic. And when you start looking at these questions, these deep, meaningful questions, you have to talk about ethics in the modern digital age. Because we're competing online.
Right.
And we're competing. And I mean, I didn't expect to come out online and find myself competing.
Right.
And that's kind of been, in a way, a struggle there. Just like the isolation that comes with online, and then the fact that are these people who are liking or selling tickets to that metaphysical meetup, are they even real? Like, it's just, we have to protect ourselves. We have to educate ourselves. And we have a responsibility as practitioners and holders of this wisdom to stand in a certain way and share it in a certain way. And again, digital access is so wonderful because people who couldn't access it in the past can now.
Mm-hmm.
But there are trade-offs.
Absolutely. I love that you brought up the competition because I was not prepared for that aspect either. And I'm just going into it. You know, I'm a Sailor Moony over here. Friendship meant everything to me. And I just was like, everyone's genuine and this is great. And I'm like, look at her. Like, we do the same thing, but I just think she's so cool, you know? And I kind of was blown away by people that they're saying things like, oh, we're sisters, sisterhood. And then I realized that they weren't, that their intentions were different than mine. And that was like a culture shock because I was like, this is like a sacred thing. Sisterhood is sacred. And these goddess circles are so personal. And like, I have way more boundaries now than when I first went into it. And I realized that everyone has different intentions, right? And mine are my own. And it's okay that they want to be more aligned with the business aspect of things because that's what they need. Where I kind of do it from a different place. But the competition was a little triggering for me. And just the criticism and like the comparing, and I feel like it's one of the reasons people get scared to come out of the broom closet in the first place. And it's just so hard. It's not talked about. Like when I came out as an astrologer, all of my friends, well, I won't say all of them, half of the people that I knew that were already astrologers stopped being my friend because now I was their competition. Even though my work was all my own and I was inspired by my own esoteric studies that I had been studying for 10 years, you know, way before I met this person, it was like, now I can't be your friend. Now you're my competition. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense at all in my brain because I want other friends that are astrologers so we can nerd out together and be like, how is this transit affecting you? What is your view on that? Right? Because to me, it's this beautiful exchange. But yeah, way more boundaries now. Right? And sisterhood, I wrote a whole poem, Don't Call Me Sister, because of my trauma with someone abusing that and saying, oh, you're my sister. And then I realized they were trying to sell me all this stuff. They were trying to extort. They were copying my work. They were judging me. They were waiting for me to slip and fall so that they could point and be like, look at her. She just fell and, you know, she has a wedgie and we're going to make sure everyone knows about it. And it felt like Mean Girls. Like it felt like high school again. And I was like, oh my God, this exists in every community. Even what it feels sacred. There are people, even in these communities, that they have negative intentions. So the protection is good and using your discernment is good. And sometimes we might be more vulnerable and sometimes we're totally allowed to retreat and not share in that digital space. And that's been a really good practice for me within my cycle. And sometimes I show up and I'm glowy and I'm glittery and I'm all present. And then sometimes I'm like, I can't today. And that's totally allowed. I'm not going to, I refuse to fake it. So yeah, I like that you brought that up because I feel like that can be kind of triggering for someone that comes out and they're not received like you might think in this spiritual community. Because, you know, we have this ideal, this utopian kind of image, I think. That's how I felt. I mean, that was totally me being delusional. And I was like, everything's going to be great when we come together in community. And then I was like, oh, wait, all of the shadows still exist. There's projections, there's egos, and, you know, there's clashing. And it's just important to hold your own integrity, have your own intentions, know your own values, and stay authentic in your purpose, you know, and always come back to that when you start to feel like, you know, you've jumped on some bandwagon and you're like, actually, I don't really align with this. Because there's so many things that I'm like all about. And then like something shifts and I'm like, actually, I think I need to pivot and allow ourselves. And even in these spaces, like there's certain there's certain witchcraft things that I might not align with. And just because I might be practicing this doesn't mean that I actually align with this other thing. So it's giving yourself permission to feel it out. Because if you've never done it, you have to, you know, you got to sample some things, and it's like, forgive yourself too. If you're like, actually, I don't know if I should have promoted that. It felt good at the time, but now I'm like, I'm going to veer. Right. And so it's like, I don't know. For me, I've learned a lot by the shifting of like, this felt really good, and now it's kind of repulsive, and now I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to try this. I'm going to release that ritual. Right. So we've talked about like witchy fast fashion before, and I would love for you to kind of touch on this. How would you define that? And why do you feel that these like mass produced magical tools might not be the best for us to work with? What do you think is being lost within this kind of consumption?
So when I came out of the broom closet online, that's when the first veil was removed. And just consumerism hit. And subscription boxes to crystals, AI generated astrology books, crystals off of Temu, pants, super cute pants with crescent moons on them for $4. This stuff's all showing up in my feed. Mm-hmm. And my academic background in consumerism, and specifically in overconsumption and the detriment it has to our mental health as Americans, specifically. I mean, everyone suffers if they have overconsumption, but in our country, particularly overconsumption is an issue. When I started seeing all of this overconsumption, it was triggering to me. All of these beautifully crafted altars with 45 rose quartz towers on them. And for me, when I stepped into my spiritual practice, it was to better my mental health. I had a mental health crisis. 2020 was hard for everybody. And to heal through all of this and lean into my spiritual practices and lean into rituals and devotion, consuming fast fashion, consuming Five Below crystals,
right,
are things that are not conducive to good mental health outcomes. They're not conducive to keeping our earth safe and healthy. Mm-hmm. It's not conducive to promoting a peaceful and equitable mankind. So it just, nothing is in alignment with true Jewish mystic values for me, except that there's a really cute crescent moon on those pants. Mm-hmm. And so I have had a natal chart reading that has really helped me understand where my intuitive powers lie, and what energies that I can bring forth and really master skillfully. Mm-hmm. And before my natal chart, I've always known that teaching was my pathway.
Right.
I've known since before the 4th grade, but in 4th grade I was nicknamed Miss Teach because everyone knew I was going to be a teacher. So it's just been in my trajectory. And now that I understand what a teacher truly is, I see that platform as a space of empowering people who are seeking knowledge.
Right.
And that's done through a flow and collaboration, an exchange of ideas on different interpretations to give us that rich dialogue so that we can then make our own inferences. And education is the punk rock witch shit that I am here for.
Yes.
And that was coined by Cult Mother, Free Palestine. But that is that we, as women, as people who identify as women in this country, we are targeted by marketing. Mm-hmm. We are targeted by consumption to create our identity and to wear it on the outside of our body like stickers. Mm-hmm. And that actually takes our power away. Mm-hmm. And I am here to activate voices, to ignite, to empower. And this is something that we need to talk about.
Right.
Because it's everywhere. And the more conversations are had around this, the more people understand that the number 3 industry in the world for slave labor is fashion. Mm-hmm. Fishing and technology are number 1 and 2. Slave labor is still apparent in the manufacturing and the chain of consumption. Crystals are mined not ethically in so many ways. And sourcing your crystal to use in your magic should be mindful if you really want to have powerful magic. And so that's part of why I want to educate people, is because we have access to such power. And when we make these informed decisions, we are more powerful.
Mm-hmm. That was beautifully said. Yeah, I watched the consumerism thing kind of shift. As someone that's kind of been studying these topics and researching and, participating in this spiritual, esoteric, occult space for over a decade, it was like a few years back, I started seeing like companies selling crystals. Like, I think it's called Sephora. I'm really that out of the loop, but it was like a makeup company, and they were like putting crystals in with like, get a crystal with your makeup. And they were like, had crystal vending machines, and everyone was wearing like Hamza shirts, and Namaste was just plastered on everything. And I was like, what's happening? Because it was like, I remember it being like, I felt kind of isolated to being like, whoa, the esoteric has now become exoteric, and they're like extorting us. It felt really weird for someone to take my spiritual practice and wear it around.
And you know what that does? Do you know what that does to your spiritual practice when a non-believer is wearing it as a fashion item?
And they don't even know.
It takes the power away from that practice, because now it's commodified.
Right. It was weird. But I watched it happen. And I was talking to someone years ago, and we were like, what happens when the esoteric becomes exoteric? And what it does is it adds a whole nother layer to it. And just because they have the symbols, and just because they are, like spouting out the stuff, because now it's shared everywhere. Okay. So I noticed when spirit science got big, which I thought they did such a cool job making these cute little animations and like bringing mysticism to the forefront. That's the thing. It was good. Some of us learned a lot. And then some people that were not really doing the work they were just spouting out spirit science stuff at like music festivals while they were like deeply hallucinating. But they had their crystal rock on, and they had the cute Hamza in their dreadlock. And I was just like, it was so weird. It was so weird. And I felt like it made me feel silly, because I felt like people were seeing me and like putting me in that genre or something. And I was like, no. I'm just here for the music, guys. Like, and, it felt uncomfortable, and I had to sit with it and try to practice non-judgment, because I don't actually think that they're doing it on purpose. I think there's something about them that is drawn to the sacred in the crystal, in the cute symbol that's on their shirt that they paid, $50 for from whatever. And so I'm like, it's there, but I feel like there's a block because they're not taking the time to really practice it, to really look into the culture that these symbols come out of, to consider this a sacred part of their life. And I also noticed those people move through it really fast. It's like fast fashion. So one day they're into crystals, and the next day now they hate crystals and they are practicing some other thing. And I don't know. I've had to completely detach from it because I'm like, that's just not what I'm doing. Just because, this person's also doing yoga doesn't mean that we're on the same path. And just letting people kind of do their own thing and totally detaching. But it has been the hardest thing, and we talked about comparing. The hardest thing for me at a point was seeing these people that felt a little bit more surface level superficial have millions of followers, and their work is supported, and they're really great at extorting those people that are seeking and don't really have a landing spot. And then here I am pouring my soul into this work, being devoted for long periods of time, doing it for all the right purposes. And I'm like, okay, I have like 1,000. But then I realized I must be doing something right because it's esoteric. It's not understood by the masses. It already feels to me sacred because it's not like this mass-produced, easily consumable thing. It's like, no, the work that we're doing, it takes a lot more mindfulness. There is a lot of devotion. There's practice. There's ritual. There's intention. And you just don't get that from those fast-changing cultural, I don't even know what to call it. I mean, it's like, it's in and out. It's in and out. And it feels like fashion, but it can be items. It can be belief systems. It can be philosophies, and they become cool for that moment. And they're just being shared so much that it's like it doesn't feel as, like you said, potent. It's like it loses a little bit of its power. But then I realized as I withdraw from my attachment to that thing that it's like, oh, well, I didn't actually need it anyways. And it just brings me more into my own personal practice. But the crystal thing is, I have seen so many people and they have like 1,000 crystals, but their life and their practices and everything is so disorganized. It's so chaotic because they're not actually working with them. They're just buying it. And it makes me think of like Tolkien's, not all that glitters is gold. The key is the relationship you're building with these magical tools, not how many you can collect and how fast. And I know for us, we're ethically sourcing them, and we're also giving ourselves space to connect with it. And that's where the magic is. Because if I have 1,000 different quartzes, crystals, which one? The quartz that I work with is my best friend. And I pull it out, and this is the one. I have a couple other quartz I keep for guests. This is mine. This is my sacred support friend. And you know what I'm saying? It makes it more powerful because there's so much intention, and it's not the amount.
It's not the quantity.
Right.
It's the quality of the relationship, because we need to understand that our tools are our allies.
Right.
We can lean into the magic of crystals. We can lean into the magic of flowers and plants. We can lean into the magic and healing of working with the energies of the planets. It's everywhere, and we can be attuned to it. The speed of modernity, the instantness, the curated visuals of our social media feeds does give us this false narrative of what it looks like to be a practicing witch, or to build an altar. I love there's so many beautiful covens that just show the candle burning. They have these gorgeous setups, and you got to watch the candle burn. And that's beautiful aesthetic, and I'll give it a double tap and a heart. But as a knowledge seeker, what does that actually do for me? And I believe that is part of our journey being here. And you touched on it when you said that the people who are wearing the crystals or the namaste shirt or mystical as fuck, with a flamingo on it, and you're like, okay, these people, they're drawn to it.
Mm-hmm.
The veil's still in place, but intuitively they're called to it. They feel it. You can walk by and see someone wearing 20 beaded bracelets up both arms, and I feel overwhelmed personally, but I'm like, oh my gosh, your fairy energy is dripping off of you.
Right.
Like you are so, like it's all around you, but you can't hear it.
Right.
And we have to silence our phones, silence media, technology, reconnect, and find the resources that are in our communities to help take it to the next level.
Right.
Because that is our individual responsibility here, is that we are in charge of our own journey for seeking this knowledge.
Right.
Most of us don't just wake up and have all of that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Just download it. Like, oh yeah. We put in the time and build the relationships and do the work. We find gurus and masters and teachers and have those conversations. But understanding that those conversations are what's actually the richness that we can share. That's how we can heal our witch wounds. Mm-hmm. This is how we can heal that lost ancestry that some of us have, where we don't get to tap into our lineage's magic because it was cut from us. Mm-hmm. But my friends might have 13th generations of their heritage and their rituals and their knowledge that they can share with me and that I can adopt, and then make an amalgamation of my own magic.
Right.
And that is also what's so beautiful, and you've spoken on here too, is that we don't have to take every spell out of a spell book recipe and say, this is the word.
Right.
It's
because that feels like a religion versus like a spiritual practice.
exactly that. And this practice is what helps us curate more knowledge, because the more we pull on this information, the more constellations and connections that we can form, the bigger the picture is, so that when we find ourselves getting to do like a reading with someone, we have this large toolkit to pull upon. And it's hard to do that when you're kind of stuck in a little echo chamber online.
Right, and you think it has to look a certain way because that's all you've seen.
And that's the only way it's going to grow.
Right.
Unless you hire a spiritual business coach. But I mean, you have to have a curated feed if you want to grow. And we see this. We know what a beautiful feed looks like for a practitioner, and we know what a really authentic feed looks like for a practitioner. And what does that balance entail?
Right. It's hard to stay authentic, and it's hard to separate yourself from your work. I feel like I would be so much better if I didn't share so much of my personal stuff, but I'm like, this is what makes me unique. And so I'm like, I'm also going to share this video of me playing guitar because music is sacred to me, and this is a part of my sacred practice. And everybody else's stuff, it's like matches and it's all pretty, and then I feel like I have judged myself. I'm telling you, because I'm like, maybe I suck at Instagram, because my stuff doesn't match and it's all weird. And it's like, sometimes I'm doing this, sometimes I'm doing that. But to me, it's all sacred. Like my embroidery is just as sacred as my altar. And so I don't see the separation, but I feel like I would have more followers if I could just post just the esoteric, hermetic tradition stuff. But because I'm like blasting people with my quirky personality, because I also love Sailor Moon, I'm losing people. But at the end of the day, the more I share my genuine perspective, the more the people that stay are actually in alignment with the whole thing that is me, right? And those are the people I want to work with. Those are the people I feel safe. So, just because someone unfollows me because like they love like witchcraft, but they hate homeopathy, and it's like, that's fine. Like they're not aligned with that. And I'm multifaceted. I'm allowed to be multifaceted. So I feel like so much is just giving ourselves permission to not mimic what we're seeing, to be inspired and be like, I really love what they're doing. I love that it matches. I also love what I'm doing. And I love that it's totally different and I haven't figured it out yet, right? Because I'm at a different point in my journey. And so it's like comparison's inevitable, but we got, like, if we could just check ourselves and be like, I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing again. And this is where having a friend is good, because friends can see us, you know, in ways that sometimes we kind of forget. I know I've just reminded my friend the other day, she was comparing herself to this other musician. And I was like, girl, how beautiful that you not like her, because there's already a her. Like, you don't need to look like her, to sing like her, to perform like her. And it's the same thing with like our magic. Our magic doesn't have to look and sound and smell and act a certain way. If your intention's there and you know, you're doing it for the right purposes, you know, it's like, then it shouldn't look exactly like somebody else's, because we're supposed to be inspired by others. But to me, the most empowering thing about witchcraft is how customizable it is.
Yes.
And how unique I can make it, you know, and because I don't want to follow one tradition. I don't want someone telling me what to do. That's not Aries, Sun, Aquarius rising, you know, like I want everybody to just feel safe enough to be themselves and not feel like they have to replicate, because we don't need the same account 1,000 times. And when you look at it, you're like, wow, that looks exactly like the other account on this topic and that account and that. But where's the person? You know, who is the curator? So the thing I love about your stuff is it's so beautiful. You have such an aesthetic, and that is a gift for sure that you have. But I still feel your energy like pouring through it. You know, I can feel your uniqueness and your beauty and your essence and everything that you're doing. And it's just, I think that people can tell, especially like the sensitives, like this person's doing it for the money and this person's doing it because it changed their life, maybe saved their life, and they want to share it with others. And that intention does radiate through everything that you're doing, you know. And some people are doing it. They're like, I was poor and I sat around one day and I was like, past life regression, it's going to make me $10,000 a month. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's great. But don't confuse your work with people that are just doing it to make money. Because, like, yes, making money is important, but the intention's different. And it's going to attract you different clients, and your content's going to look different because it's coming from a genuine place. It's not being made. Those people are paying people, by the way.
Yeah.
To make their content. You know how exhausting it is to make content all the time?
Or they're not even paying. They're just having a computer program or AI do it for them.
Right. It's making their prompts. It's creating the images. And it's like, I can sense that from a mile away, you know, as a sensitive. As somebody that works with essences, I'm like, that, they did not write that. You know, that is not their art. I can feel it. I can feel that they didn't put that there's no love in it. And we were kind of talking about art before we started recording, because we were talking about feng shui and like chi, and it's not just the painting that you bought from Ross that has been mass produced 1 billion times, you know, that you're paying $5 for, not having any chi in it. Your content has chi too, and you cannot fake it. Okay. And if you are faking it and getting people, you know, at some point when they step into their power, they're going to be like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I just totally sold out to this person and took what they said as like a Bible or something like that. They have this authority. Right. But yeah, it's wild. So the next question is just interesting because we're touching on that. Sorry, jumped ahead. It just naturally flows.
It does.
Into the conversation. For you, what are some red flags that you've noticed when it comes to spiritual authority figures in the digital space?
This is a wonderful question. And again, there's great diverse voices and perspectives in the 2025 Llewellyn's Witches Companion. So I will constantly promote that, just keeping that around because it's got brief essays. But this reaffirmed or affirmed, one of the two, some of the red flags that I've seen. Mm-hmm. And the first thing is the content, because what are you selling? Mm-hmm. And there is something to be super aware of, that sex sells. Mm-hmm. but also be aware of the client that might be consuming that.
Right.
There's also a lot of red flags in the publishing sphere. So with Coven's library, with my academic background, with my love of reading, with my aspirations to write, I have become more attuned to the issues around AI generated books and these publications that are coming out very quickly.
Right.
These really quick turnaround times. And in academia, as an aside, now granted, publishing with a publisher isn't usually like what it is in academia where it's peer reviewed. But from coming up with what you are writing to writing it to then sending it off to a panel of experts for them to then review, critique, and send back for then you to revise and then send to them for their approval to get published can take years.
Right.
So the process in academics is extremely rigorous. But because of that rigor, you should be able to trust that content.
Right.
When
Because you put intention in every single aspect, every part of that entire, from the creation to the production of, the mass production of it, you made all of these choices. It was all intentional. Every step of the way, you had power and control, and you were steering it, you were guiding it. And you knew what you were saying because you had to actually research it to write it. What happens when AI is writing these books and these people are
reading and consuming, but then also not even... I don't know anyone who's bought an AI book, so I need to give that disclaimer.
Okay.
But when I see these specifically like astrology books that are being bound and sent to my Instagram girlies out there, if the information is accurate and then the retention and then how do you use that knowledge to actually continue on your soul's journey, to heal, to better yourself, or for the collective, or to understand the meaning of life. That's not happening,
Right.
in my opinion. Now, that might not be the case. Some girlie might be like, oh my gosh, this is life-changing. But having a practitioner work with you, have a dialogue, get to have a conversation two-way, get to answer questions, to let you be seen and heard in that process of specific to astrology is where the power is.
Right.
And these books that are coming through that are just being put on coffee tables because they have nice book covers of a hand with a snake and long fingernails and a crescent moon. Because I'm not above it either. I love all that shit too.
Right. The aesthetic it's attractive.
I love it. And I'm not above that at all, but that's actually a red flag to me, is because why is it so cute?
Right.
Why is it so cute?
Right, because some of those old occult books are boring as shit
Yeah.
on the cover.
Yeah,
but it has like the deep stuff in it. So.
Yeah, but like a beautiful velvet covered coffee table book that just gives you Wikipedia definitions of the different crystals.
Right.
Is that really going to be a tool that you use for bibliomancy? Or is that really going to be a tool that you gain knowledge from? Or is that going to be a dust collector in your house?
Right.
And for me, when I create content, when I work on creating deliverables for people to take from the classes, I hope, my intention is that that will be used forever.
Right.
Like it's heirloom. Like honestly, I have a Tree of Life study, and the word heirloom has been used because it is a true study.
Right.
Like if I want to one day get that as a bound book and sell it to someone, that's a huge project.
Right.
I couldn't possibly get it delivered to your house in 24 hours. Like how? That's a red flag.
Right.
Speed.
Yes.
Speed, quickness, turnaround time, translations into multiple languages really fast. Apparently, you'll see that on Amazon.
Right.
I don't personally use Amazon, so I don't know about the book translations. But that was in this Llewellyn piece talking very specifically on like how to navigate Amazon's marketplace.
Right.
Because if an author has several books that have come out all within like the same year on
Right.
varied topics, how can anybody have a truly deep understanding of that content if they're putting out so many different things so quickly?
Right.
As I say that, throwing stones in a glass house is someone who does a lot of like introductory stuff where I'm trying to entice your curiosity in those spheres. I still can't turn around very quickly. I mean, it's taken a year for 2 classes worth of materials to like truly be developed where I can stand confident with them.
Right.
And those aren't books, like books. We're just talking 20 pages.
So, you know, we've talked a little bit about this quick content, the algorithmic influence, but what are some ways that our listeners can return to earth-centered practices and help to tune out some of this noise of the spiritual capitalism?
That is a beautiful question. That is a needed question because we can sit here all day and I can bellyache and complain, but if we can't give people the insight and our experiences so that they can then adopt them into their own practices, what's the point? For me, and in my opinion, it's to ground in the community. So cyberspace is great. For my personal projects with Coven's library, cyberspace is my end goal. I want to be in cyberspace because of access.
Right.
But as the curator, as Sarah Frankel, I want to be in my local bookstore supporting that little cute witch who's trying to make it in a 700 square foot store.
Right.
Like going into the spaces where the community thrive, where people get information and share information is going to be the best practice. I think the more we have these conversations around mental health and social media and how spiritual practices enhance mental health, I think people will start naturally attuning to slowing down, realizing that less is more. You don't need to have all those selenite spheres on that bookshelf. We don't need to have a certain quantity of things or a certain dollar amount invested into our practice to be legitimate.
Right.
And that we don't have to have a facade to be legitimate in our power. And when we can connect with our true selves and connect with our community, that's how we can overcome all of this. Because there are people doing this everywhere. There's people doing this all over the place. We have punk rock shit happening all the time. We've got people thrifting. We got people repurposing. We got pop-ups. We got community workshops. We got swaps. That's not true, but I would love to go to a crystal swap or like an oracle card, like just a metaphysical swap. Some of the big cities have those. Those look so fun.
Yeah, for
You just
sure.
bring like a deck that you don't resonate with anymore, and you can just swap it with someone else who maybe was gifted a deck they don't resonate with. It's a great way to move energies.
Right.
So, and then for me also, when it comes to crystals, unless I'm sourcing explicitly for like a ritual, or if I have a client who wants a specific spell work done, I try to embody what the mermaids have taught me. And that's patience. And that the crystal will come to me.
Right.
And that if it's in my highest good and in alignment with me, that crystal will come to me. I don't have to keep buying and consuming.
Right.
Again, there's a time and place. Like if I need a little citrine quartz immediately, like it's an easy fix. But if I'm wanting to grid my home, if I want to have a very specific geode in a very specific space, maybe that needs to be something that's thoughtfully curated.
Right.
And I mean, that word will continually be just be down, like curated. That is so important to what we do. And we have the power to. There's no excuse. We have access. I don't have to be alone. And I can find the tools I need, and I can make informed choices to find alternatives. So I just recently learned that there's a lot of unethical sourcing behind Palo Santo wood for cleansing. And when I started learning about how it's not ethically sourced and it's not sustainable, that I'm just going to shift some of my spiritual hygiene practices away from using that one product, because I can do a lot of my own cleansing with sound, selenite, carnelian. I've got other sources. I don't need to get a cute little Palo Santo bundle with some rosemary on it. Like, I can actually find alternatives that are more aligned with me, or even better, that are locally sourced or grown in my natural environment.
Right. Right, because it's really hard, even when you're buying from local shops. You have to trust that they are ethically sourcing it. And it's, with that particular item, it's hard to know, And I think, if people were using it more sacredly and maybe not just like burning through it, it wouldn't be a more scarce resource. But yeah, I like that you're bringing it down to like even the local level, In Tennessee, we have so many beautiful herbs that we could be working with for cleansing that are local, that you can grow in your own garden. And when you grow it, you're putting your intention into it, and now it's even more magical.
And then you can water it with the moon water you collected. That's been enhanced with your crystal magic.
Right.
And then that's going to be the plant that you dry to cleanse your space.
Right.
Like, yes, queen. Like, that's how you do it.
You're taking back all the power.
All of it.
Everything you're doing is sacred, and you don't need to source more materials all the time. Like you said, like, if it's in alignment. But, sometimes I'll be reading a spell book and I'm like, I like this, but I'm just going to bring something else in for that. Right. And it's just helping inspire me, really. I'm actually making it up myself, but I'm like, well, I do have this, this, and this, so I'm going to roll with that. But then I'm going to bring in my own energy into it, and we're allowed to do that. And that's the beauty about the craft. You're crafting it yourself, and I feel like a lot of times we're so disempowered that we're just giving our authority away, and we're saying, well, this person said I have to do this, and if I don't have this crystal, then how am I going to, but yeah, I really love like how you're bringing it to like going to the shops, connecting with it right then and there, real time, and then I realized just like how like I was a little blessed, because when I first started, you had to go to a metaphysical shop. I mean, the thought of buying a crystal online, it never occurred to me back then because we didn't buy stuff online at all. Like, I mean, if you bought something online, it was on eBay or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't like, oh, we go online to shop for everything. That's a newer thing. So I would go to like Green Earth Emporium, and it was special. And I would go, when I was in Knoxville, I would just go. And if I bought a crystal, it's because it stood out to me. Sometimes I would buy a crystal and give it to a stranger, because I wanted to support the shop. But at this point, I rarely buy crystals. If I go to an expo, a lot of times, because I do it so rarely, I will set the intention, because I like to support the booths, that today I'm going to buy one crystal. I might buy like one cleansing agent, a piece of art, and that way I'm kind of collecting, but I'm not just like, oh my God, I need 100 crystals today, and it's so intentional, and it is supporting those local crystal shop owners and those creators. And, I just, maybe people don't even realize that they have that kind of access. Maybe there's some limitation around, like, maybe we're just really blessed here in Knoxville too, that we have so many local shops, You know, like the town that I grew up in, if I wanted to source some crystal quartz, I mean, I would have to drive to Knoxville. Like it wasn't a metaphysical kind of town. And so then I want to give grace to the people that don't really have the options. And then maybe a good option would be to follow some local shops, you know, so you're still supporting real people and not just these big, huge companies. Or maybe I love like Etsy because you can kind of get to know like the artists or the creators, and they might share like, hey, we got it from this location. It was ethically mined. And so you're still putting a lot of intention. So, you know, it's like buying stuff on the internet's not necessarily bad, but like we're saying, you have to put a little bit more work in the researching of where did it come from.
There is that level of accountability. Mm-hmm. There is a level of privilege to access because we can put in the research. The thing is, you need to slow down.
Right.
You have to go to Etsy.
Right.
And then you have to search through the vendors and see what works for you instead of going straight to Google, clicking the shopping tab.
Right.
I mean, there is more intention, more work. But again, and as we keep bringing this to it, this is how we create the power of our practice and our rituals. Is I know what went into that crystal. Mm-hmm. I know how it was sourced. I know that I sourced it this way. Mm-hmm. And that can also be part of the crystal's journey to you.
Right.
So I have a crystal that taught me a lesson in patience. Again, the mermaids constantly remind me this lesson. Mm-hmm. And it took me 6 weeks. I would go to the shop and look at it, and I didn't have $119, but I'd look at it, and then I'd come back, and I'd just keep saving. And I would go into the shop, make sure the crystal was still there, and then not buy anything. Right. And enact that true discipline because I was saving for that beautiful hunk of jasper. Mm-hmm. Like, I wanted that.
Right.
And I was going to work to get it. Mm-hmm. And I was able to get it, and I have it, and I love and adore it. And I underuse it. It is definitely my most underutilized crystal.
But it's still in your home.
And it has...
doing its work.
It is doing its work because I know what it took. Mm-hmm. I know the choices I had to make to get it into my home. And Etsy is a great source for practitioners to use to move products and talismans, wands. My partner got me a beautifully crafted wand off of Etsy. And part of the transparency with it was it came with a handwritten scroll. It was beautiful. And it talked about how many times the person it was a single slice of wood. They got it in a single slice of birch. And then they told me the crystals that were used to sand and smoothen it. Mm-hmm. All this beautiful detail that I can feel in the wand. And when I make a talisman for somebody, I like to provide that information so that they can really harness that power.
Right.
And the sourcing, the using, the journey towards this power is never ending. It's always evolving. But I'll say it again. We have a responsibility. And in this day and age, with the access we have to the internet, the biggest hurdle for our mental health is going to be to slow down and stop consuming as much. Mm-hmm. And that's intentional. Right.
Yeah, I really like this because I feel like it's every area of my life is asking me to slow down. It's not even, well, everything's spiritual to me, but, you know, even like for my mental health, like I'm moving too fast, then my mental health starts to spiral. You know, I'm eating fast food. Well, I don't ever eat fast food, but I'm eating quicker food. And my gut starts to rebel, and it's like everything is just guiding me back to more simplicity, more intention, more mindfulness, more grace. And it's like we were designed to hold that pace of nature, you know? And I feel like sometimes we're zooming through, our entire being is rebelling against it. You know, our minds are like, I can't consume, I can't retain all of this. Our bodies are like, you need to nourish me. Please,
Help.
like, source your food materials better, you know? And like, and then our souls are yearning for the devotion, you know? Our souls don't need all of these tools. And I love the tools, don't get me wrong, but don't allow them to become distractions from the intention itself, you know? And sometimes we do need guides and teachers and people to hold space for us. But I always like to ask myself, like, is this person that I'm working with actually empowering me? Will I ever be able to ride this bicycle without training wheels? Or are they making me dependent on them and actually convincing me that, you know, like making me codependent, right? And as this Aries queen, I'm more aware of that because I love working with people, but I'm also like, okay, at some point, I should be able to do some of this more independently. Or like, are they really teaching me anything?
And that's why ethics is here, because there is this issue. There is an issue of the predatory acts that are occurring for people who are on these spiritual journeys, because sometimes these people can be the most disenfranchised, or they could be vulnerable populations seeking guidance. And if the wisdom imparted to them is not actually going to help them, but keep them actually in a cycle of paying
Right.
for insight, paying for knowledge, there's a karmic issue going on here, because I believe we should be paying for that knowledge. If a practitioner, and I'm saying this as a practitioner who's put hours and hours and hours and years and so much energy into expanding my own personal awareness, the very minuscule dollar amount that I ask for to help support my family, I feel is to help guide somebody onto their own trajectory.
Right.
And if you feel that the practitioner is not able to offer that, especially after a couple times around, that should be a red flag that this could be predatory.
Right.
And figuring out and navigating that as someone who pays practitioners or someone who is charging for practice, it can be treacherous. But being aware that the ultimate goal is growth,
Right,
is how you can avoid these suckers and vacuums of your money and energy.
right. Right. And I love just Coven's library in general, which you can share a little bit more about that in a moment, because you are creating this content to help guide people, to help show them that this exists. Here's some examples about how to work with it. Here's some sources if you want to explore it more. Here's some practitioners that I have, personally worked with, so I can trust because I know them, and it's like you're putting so much intention and you're making it accessible, but it doesn't feel like you're enforcing it on people. You're just sharing the information. And I love that so much, because it is disorienting when we're having to follow 1,000 different pages. We're like, we're really into this, we're really into that. But I like that you're kind of bringing a lot of the different metaphysical practices into one space, and also giving credit where credit's due and saying, this is where I learned this, or, I really love this. I'm kind of getting into it, but I'm going to share this other person's work on it because they've already mastered it. And, it's so beautiful how you bring this community aspect into your work, and it's incredible. And, I definitely am totally in support of all of the beauty that you bring into this world in this particular field. So for those who don't know about Coven's library, could you just briefly explain what it is and how they can find it? And
So Coven's Library is just getting started. Right now, I'm only doing in person on ground here in Knoxville. The ultimate goal, though, is to create an online digital resource. So you start in the classroom, you get to do your experiment in the classroom, you get your feedback from participants, and then I can cultivate the online space where I really amplify voices of diverse practitioners, marginalized identities, and making sure that there's just an array of voices speaking to the topics like the magic of crystals. Because that's not just a white girl thing. I don't know how else to put it, but there's a lot more to it, and there's a wealth of knowledge, and making sure that there is a well-rounded knowledge base of information. So here in Knoxville, I teach Introduction to Crystals and Crystal Magic. And in that class, we explore the subtle art of meditation. We explore different facets of crystals, their makeup, and their metaphysical properties. I do an Introduction to Lunar Magic. In that class, we learn about the 8 aspects of the moon and how to use that to harness manifestation and how to create magic in that realm. I am finalizing an introduction to astrology to act almost as a gateway to your astrology courses, which are much larger scale. My courses are about an hour to 90 minutes. They're very introduction, like I like to consider them an appetizer.
Which is so needed.
To helping people springboard, because we do have these larger, longer format foundational courses, but if you can go in with just a little bit of a footing, it can be a lot less intimidating.
Right. It's empowering.
It is empowering. And part of that empowerment is the access. Access is absolutely important to Coven's Library, along with initiatives around sustainability. And so keeping a really low price point, keeping just basically enough to keep a knowledge seeker intrigued. Like, it's like, I'm talking, I don't want money to be what keeps people from stepping into their power.
Right.
But also, I'm in a lot of debt as a doctor who doesn't have a job.
Right.
Higher education is very expensive. 15 years in higher education is very expensive. And so charging for this beautiful head on my shoulders and what my brain can do to read, to curate, to synthesize, to critically review, and then to spit it all out into a nice little 1-hour presentation is a lot. And that is my magic. That is part of my creation magic of why I'm here on this earth, is because I have that skill.
Right.
And Coven's Library is part of my journey, is part of why I'm here, because I love to teach. I love knowledge. And I love learning. And there are so many of us like that. And so I rather do it in something that's actually super meaningful to me, like my Jewish practices or mysticism or spiritual science or any of this. This is where my heart actually lies more than in a classroom at the university.
Right.
So Coven's Library can be found on Instagram, Facebook. I have a website, a Stan store. And then I have a Patreon where I do exclusive. So I have like lunar solar magic, some tarot or astrology, and I do book synopses. So I will introduce one of the books that I've read and kind of provide a critical insight into it to make sure that it's not like I'm sitting there reviewing books, trying to push books. I'm actually trying to help better our understanding of the knowledge in the book.
Right.
So that's a critical space, and that's a great way to help support me, the library, and my family.
Yes. I love that. Your work is so valuable. And I love that you make it accessible, and it's definitely worth every penny, all of these years that you've studied and put into teaching. And what an honor that you've decided to view your course and teach something that, you're really passionate about, that you feel like the collective needs a little guidance in. And, even though it's not as financially sustaining, I think that shows right there where your heart lies, So, well, I love this episode so much, and I'm so happy that we have this. That's just forever going to exist now. And it means so much to me that you took the time to come out here and share your beautiful wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to think of the next topic for when I'm back.
Yes, definitely. Any of your courses or any, specific thing that you would like to share and promote, you're always welcome back on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.
Whoa.